Hi there, and thanks for joining me. So have you ever heard of Dolly Mixture dolls houses? I hadn't until recently, but it turns out that this doll's house that I recently picked up is a Dolly Mixture doll's house, and they have a fascinating story behind them. In the 1950s, we opened our first open prison here in the UK, near Wakefield in Yorkshire. And it was an open prison, so the inmates were learning a trade while they were inside. So there were farms, there were libraries, and there were workshops. And in those workshops, they made toys, and they made toy trains, toy aeroplanes, and toy dolls' houses. So by late summer, early autumn, the workshops would start getting orders from the prison authorities as to what they needed to make for that year. And in the 1950s, there was adults within the prison. So you had grown men making these dolls' houses. So they were quite ornate designed. You had bay windows, you had flowers up the outside, and you actually had electrical lighting installed as well. Now my house dates from the 1960s, 1963-ish, and it looks like it's a time when the dolls' houses were made by young boys before they were incarcerated into an adult prison. So they were in a Borstal, young offenders institution. So I'm pretty sure this doll's house dates from about 1963. It appears in a Gamages magazine, that's a department store, and one of their magazines has this doll's house in it, slightly different colouring, so I think this has been painted since construction, and that was from 1963, when it cost 49 shillings and sixpence, which is about £3 in today's money, but obviously in real terms that's a lot more than £3. So it's a fascinating story behind these dolls' houses. I had no idea that some dolls' houses were made in the prison authorities. And interestingly enough, these dolls' houses would appear alongside all the big brands in the department stores, but they never had their origin on them or any make on them, so they were just in plain cardboard boxes. So nobody knew who made them. And the only reason I know where they were made is this fascinating story that appears in Doll's House, Past and Present Online magazine. And I'm going to put the links below. There's a couple of lovely ladies there in that magazine who've done some research. And it just happened to be that a lady writing one of the articles had bought one of these houses, and her husband happened to take the house into an old person's home where her mother was and showed them the doll's house. And one of the elderly gentlemen in that house said, "Oh, I know where they came from. We used to make them." And it turns out he was a prison guard at Wakefield Prison and was able to tell the story as to how these houses came into being. Absolutely fascinating story, as I'm sure you'll agree. So I'm just going to open the doll's house so we can have a closer look inside. You can see it's just got the two windows at the top, nice wide windows, and some narrow windows below. What I find quite fascinating about this doll's house is the front door is really tiny. And it's the size of a window. So basically that's a window frame that's been used for the front door. And then they put a little tiny door in there. So I'm not sure my doll's house people would be able to fit through that little tiny door, but it adds to the charm of the doll's house, doesn't it? Now, this doll's house did come with some of the furniture, and I've left some of the furniture inside, but I've also added some of my own furniture just to give it an idea of how I might furnish it. And this side of the door is loose, so I'll just pop that to one side. So we've just got the two main rooms on each floor, and there is a dividing wall that goes up between the rooms here. There's no staircase, so it's quite a simple design, but it's quite a charming house, as I'm sure you'll agree. Pretty sure it's a 1/16 scale, as my 1/16 furniture seems to fit quite nicely in that, and that's the same scale as my old childhood doll's house. And there are some similarities between its style and the Trian doll's house. As I say, pretty sure this was made in Wakefield Prison by the young boys who were incarcerated in there in the 1960s. Hopefully it taught them a trade that they could then carry on and use when they were released from prison or from young offenders institution, and they would be able to carry on making fascinating things like this doll's house. So I hope you've enjoyed finding out about Dolly Mixture dolls houses with me. So it was a fascinating read. I should put the links below to the articles that I read that came up with this information, and I hope you have a read and find it fascinating too. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye bye.